Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausen Pereira. Since you are here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get incisive content. The Bharata First team is also running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me. The program is called Hot Seat. Details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to come forward and contribute to keep our content alive. To continue to show your love and support, I need it now more so than ever. Now, amid a growing perception that India's 3-year-old insolvency resolution system has been less than productive in saving businesses and aiding lenders to recover their assets, the government has amended the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code through an ordinance to provide for a so-called PrePackaged resolution scheme for micro, small and medium enterprises. The scheme, where only the debtor will get to trigger the bankruptcy process, is expected to yield much faster resolution than the extant corporate insolvency resolution process and cut costs. It could also reduce litigation, often triggered by defaulting promoters to retain control of their firms, and help thousands of MSMEs struggling to cope with the havoc wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic. The IBC Amendment Ordinance 2021 comes within 2 weeks of the lifting of the 1-year suspension of insolvency proceedings against code-related defaults amid heightened possibilities of a rise in bad loan cases. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the prepackaged resolution scheme for MSMEs. Joining me on the program today are Anil Goyal, founder and chairman, AAA Insolvency Professionals; Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, Government of India; and Charan Singh, Chairman, eGrow Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Anil Goyal, let me start the program with you first. Let's understand and analyze what this pre-packaging scheme is and why is it required.
Thank you, Frank. This is my pleasure to be part of this program. And this pre-packaged insolvency resolution process, in fact, it was in demand for the last about more than a year. And the difficulties faced in corporate insolvency resolution process is kind of supposed to be eliminated in this process. Number two, the time is supposed to be reduced to a substantial extent for finding resolution of MSME. The Government of India was working on this since, in fact, beginning of 2020. First of all, they relaxed the definition of MSME. And now the relaxed definition of MSME is actually covering more than 70% of the enterprises in India. Now the relaxed definition is investment in plant and machinery to the extent of 50 crores, and the status would remain as MSME, and the turnover should not exceed 250 crores. So with this enlarged definition, I think the Government of India has tried to cover most of the domestic industry into this segment of MSME. This is very, very important because that is the segment which is generating a lot of employment. So this sector has to be protected. For protecting this sector, this pre-packaged insolvency resolution process has been introduced. This is much different from corporate insolvency resolution process because the promoters, directors, they would continue to run the company. They would continue to do the business as they were doing. Slight change, but that particular operations will be monitored by the resolution professional. The promoters, they would first go to their financial creditors that I have a default, I have committed a default, and I need a restructuring, I need a insolvency resolution process. So there are two possibilities. One, that the promoters would like to get the company restructured under this prepackaged. We can even, in short, we can call it PIRP, because the earlier was it was CIRP. Now we can call it PIRP in short, because otherwise prepackaged insolvency resolution process repeatedly. So the promoters can go to banks that this is my resolution plan, which is called base resolution plan. The financial institutions, the banks, the financial creditors, they would look into the resolution plan. They would also see one very important protection. There should not be any loss to the operational creditors. That is also something which is the duty of the financial creditors to assure that there should not be any loss to the financial creditors. And if there is any loss to the financial creditors, matching loss has to be there to the promoters also by way of reducing their equity into the company. So that means, like, in case somebody else is taking over the company, then this protection under section 53, the allocation, the priority of creditors, that would be applicable. However, in case the company is continuing in the hands of the same promoters and the directors and the shareholders, the loss to the operational creditors is restricted. There's a very, very important reason it is restricted. So the total time presently, I think everyone understands that there is no limit of the present time of CIRP. For PIRP, the total time which is stipulated in the law is 120 days. And within 90 days, the resolution plan has to be approved by the Committee of Creditors and has to be submitted to the adjudicating authority, means NCLT. This part, we are not sure how the litigation will, as in the past also, the original CIRP was restricted to 180 days, but it actually is increasing almost every year from 330 from 180 to 270, and then from 270 to 330, and again 330 is not the limit under some special circumstances. We need to see how this 120 days limit is maintained. This part is of course subject to the various other considerations, and also the capacity of the NCLT is also very important. Sure. Because in case the government of India would increase the capacity of adjudicating authority, NCLT in this case, that actually would add to the efforts that the government of India is intent to make. See, there is also, yeah.
Points taken. Let me bring in the other panelists as well, and I'll come back to you for another reaction. Mr. Rajesh Shankar, let's take this discussion forward and go back a little bit as well, and talk about some of the issues really as far as the IBC is concerned. Is this now going to ensure that some of the problems that we've seen over the last 3 years are addressed?
This is a welcome step, because if you look at the circumstances prevailing in the economy today, we've had an unprecedented historic shock through the COVID and the lockdown. Now, the government was sensible in giving breathing space to enterprises by putting a moratorium on the IBC proceedings, also some moratorium on debt repayment, etc. And so it bought breathing time. But the fact of the matter is that the economy is still to recover fully. And as the RBI has in its last recent report said, that they expect bank NPA numbers or levels to almost go up to around 14%, which is a historic high. And we still don't know whether the pain is really behind us. So if the economy is to be revived smoothly and quickly, then the old settled ways of thinking about bank debt defaults, NBAs, etc., have to be set aside for some time. And this process, which has been brought in through the ordinance, will hopefully save a very large number of MSMEs from reaching a stage where they stop functioning altogether. Because the fact of the matter is that there are two huge capacity constraints in the economy in the IBC code system. One has been pointed out by the previous panelists, so the capacity of the NCLT to take decisions speedily. And the other constraint is in the capacity of and the supply of resolution professionals. Now, if you have thousands of MSMEs to be taken over and run and managed by resolution professionals, it just won't happen properly. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and we should be conscious of the fact that the next year or so are going to be very, very challenging in terms of managing the economy, in terms of handling bank NPAs and handling the credit or debt default phenomenon, which will suddenly hit us very hard once the IBC abeyance process comes to an end.
Sure. So, Professor Charan Singh, taking the discussion forward now, let's hear your thoughts really on the 3-year-old insolvency resolution system as a whole.
So, first and foremost, I think IBC has started doing a very good job. But as you know, that almost a year has passed by and there was a moratorium on IBC. Now, what I have a feeling that because of this 365 days moratorium that had happened, there is a stress in the industry which is taking place. And there's going to be a surge of cases that will come up in NCLT. So I think the government in its wisdom, knowing that IBC has been so successful vis-a-vis other resolution plans, knowing that there is a pent-up number of cases here, has come out with a very wise decision to use a pre-pack. Now, pre-pack is also practiced in other countries, especially in Europe. It's a standard thing. Now, when it comes to MSMEs, as you know, there are about 6 odd crores of MSMEs in the country. And if the stress level has to be seen, the mortality rate in MSMEs is always the highest because the resilience is the least there and the buffers are the minimum there. So given that situation, it was obvious that there's going to be a surge from the MSMEs, and therefore coming out with a pre-pack, I think, is the most appropriate thing in this time. Now, having heard the benefits of the pre-pack, as we have just heard from Mr. Goel and I think Mr. Ajay Shankar, now the issue is how are we going to take it forward? Firstly, as already mentioned, the resolution plan is now reducing the number of days, which is very good, but I hope we can stick to it. I see a catch somewhere else. While it is good that the promoters will have the control of the MSMEs and that therefore jobs will be protected, and I hope they'll be protected during the resolution process. But there is also a fear, and one can think about it, that could also lead to leakages while 120 days, which may get stretched, or even if not get stretched, 120 days is 4 months, is a long time. Many things can happen. The promoters could come out with or do certain things which defeat the very purpose of this. Now, of course, you can come back and tell me that a Swiss option has been given. Now, Swiss option in a way protects that, and of course, as Mr. Goel was mentioning, in case there is a hit, there's a haircut at some level, the promoters can't escape that. But then the fear is that though this is different from the standard IBC, and as just mentioned, can the professionals run so many MSMEs? No, they can't. So we had to come out with a scheme like pre-pack where the promoters continue to be at the helm of affairs in the saddle, but then there is a catch there that this could be misused. So I think one has to be prepared that this is an experiment we are doing. I think this experiment has been successful in other countries, especially in Europe. But in our country, we'll have to be watchful and see what is happening and how it plays out. It's too early, of course, it's just being delivered, and we'll have to see how it plays out. But I'll keep my fingers crossed. On one hand, I congratulate the people who formulated this. On the other hand, given the plan, given the past experience with MSMEs, I will move cautiously and carefully.
Absolutely. All right. So taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Goel, let me come back to you. So let's talk about the procedure really to file pre-pack insolvency, and will there be a pre-pack scheme for larger companies as well, or should I say, should there be a pre-pack scheme for larger companies?
See, the procedure which is stipulated in the law is presently the part of the code has been released and still we are awaiting for the rules. The rules would be required for filing of the applications under this chapter. Also, detailed regulations would be required to be announced by and released by IBPI. So once the rules and regulations are released, which may happen within about 10 days time, and then the applications can be submitted. And the first and foremost is very, very important. See, the corporate debtor, any company who actually has defaulted as per section 4 of the IBC, and the default limit in this case is it can be notified, and it can be any amount, may not be 1 crore rupees, may not be 1,000 rupees, it can be anything which is in between, because this is MSME segment, and 1 crore may be higher and even 1,000 may be very lower. So the government may come up with a new kind of limit for a default. So once the default is there, the corporate debtor, the promoters, first of all, they would have to take the consent of the shareholders. They will have to take the consent of the directors. It's shareholders also as a special resolution, and in the case of directors also 3/4 of the directors, they should first of all authorize that the company may go for PIRP. So then they also have to prepare all that detailed financial information. That is very, very important, that the detailed financial information is prepared by the company itself. And there is a provision, not only detailed financial information. In fact, in this process, there is no procedure to seek claims from the creditors. Now, the corporate debtor, the company will provide a list of creditors to the RP. Every detail of the creditor, the security interest, and the RP only has to just write a letter to them, communicate to them that this is what I have received from the company. In case you have to change, you please let me know. You have to modify, please let me know. So this is very, very important and time saving and a lot of litigation saving process. So that is the reason that the committee can be constituted within 2 days of the start of PIRP. The first meeting of the committee can be held within 1 week of the constitution of the committee of creditors. So first of all, the list of creditors within 2 days, constitution of committee within within 1 week, within 7 days, and also the first meeting of the committee within 7 days. And also there is no procedure of interim resolution professional and then resolution professional. So that process also has been curtailed. So this requires information which is to be provided by the promoters, corporate debtor. Then the base resolution plan will be prepared by the corporate debtor, and that base resolution plan will be taken to financial creditors. That base resolution plan, in case the financial creditors, 66% of the financial creditors, considering their total amount of debt based on their value of the debt, if they approve, then only the application will be submitted to adjudicating authority, NCLT. So most of the part which was supposed to be done during CIRP, presently is being done before even the PIRP starts. So the consent of the members, consent of the directors, consent of the creditors is actually happening before even the application goes to NCLT. So most of the litigation, the pressure on the NCLT is going to be reduced. That is something which is very, very important. I think Mr. Charanjit ji, he has raised a question like there may be a possibility of misuse during the PIRP, misuse of the resources of the corporate debtor during PIRP by the promoter directors. See, the COC has been empowered, a very large power, that in case the COC see that there is a mismanagement, there is a fraudulent transaction which is being happening during PIRP, they can just pass a resolution with 66% voting share, and the management of the corporate debtor can immediately vest with the RP during PIRP itself, just by one resolution. And then the RP will have all the powers to take control and custody of all the affairs and all the assets of the corporate debtor. So that's a protection. That's a very big power with the COC. So that is only to protect the fear that the promoters would probably do something which is leakage or fraudulent transactions.
Sure. Absolutely. All right.
See, they did.
Yeah, go ahead. Very quickly.
So now in case we see this procedure, the committee of creditors now would also have the power that in case the committee of creditors see that this resolution plan is not acceptable, the claims which were told to us was not correct. During this RP's appointment, we have seen there are much new information has come. And if the resolution plan is not acceptable, they can immediately ask the RP to terminate the PIRP. So if the PIRP is terminated, then the company goes back to directors. So nothing happens, and the entire cost of this process will be borne by the company only.
Sure.
In case this happens. So the provisions have been made that in case the information provided by the corporate debtor, promoters, directors is misleading, of the committee of creditor constituted is misleading, then there are prosecution provisions. This will be considered as offense, and there are imprisonment provisions between 3 to 5 years. So this is a deterrent that nobody would provide false information. Every CD would provide correct information of the claims and correct information of the assets. So if everything which probably under section 19.2, every resolution professional is fighting, and every company is presently seeing an application to adjudicating authority that they are not cooperating, company is not cooperating, auditor is not cooperating, directors are not cooperating, so that particular part is over. If they are not cooperating, the COC can take a decision, okay, go back.
Right.
If they are not cooperating, the COC can take a decision, okay, the RP is taking over the process. So everything has actually been come back to COC. The COC is more powerful now, more and more powerful.
Points taken. All right. So let me now take the discussion forward with Mr. Rajesh Shankar. Mr. Shankar, so we've noticed in the past that the insolvency process, and like mentioned by the other panelists as well, is highly cumbersome, and it's also rigorous. So the time limit for the resolution has now drastically reduced. Is this something that is going to help the entire process, and is this also going to help the stressed companies?
That is the intention, and I hope that when this process is implemented, the expected results are achieved. But there are two things which have to be borne in mind and which would be very severe challenges. You see, the creditors, through the committee of creditors, have to take decisions on the resolution plan that is submitted. Now, the decision is bound to involve haircuts, maybe severe haircuts, because the fact of the matter is that the economy has been under stress, production has suffered, sales have suffered, and as all economists teach us, that there is no such thing as a free lunch. So this has to be paid for. And the only way it can be paid for is either by the banks taking the haircut or taking a sound commercial decision that the enterprise, when normalcy returns, will do well enough and will be able to honor debts after the resolution plan is approved. Or that this is beyond redemption, it really needs to be wound up and assets sold. Now, these are three decisions, difficult decisions on a case-to-case basis. And unless they are taken efficiently, fairly, and in a manner which is seen as fair and just, then it will not proceed very speedily. And if it does not proceed very speedily, then you have a whole problem piling up, because in the relief packages, there are a few lakh crores of debt given to MSMEs which are government guaranteed debts. So all of that has to be now handled in a manner where as many as possible enterprises survive and are enabled to grow with a debt burden which they can handle. And those which are beyond redemption are wound up as soon as possible and either sold to somebody else or asset sales takes place. Now, so far, this country has not had a record of do this kind of thing at reasonable speed with a reasonable scale. Now, so this is the new challenge that we have, and I do hope that everybody is able to get together and bring the right quality of decision making and the speed of decision making so that the pain on the economy is minimized and we really get onto a high growth trajectory as soon as possible. That is possible, that should happen. But how well this is operated in terms of timelines, in terms of fairness, in terms of sensible decisions in the first few months, because that sets the template and the expectations in the market from all stakeholders. So the first few months of implementation would be very critical. If all market players see it as being fair, speedy, right for the economy, right for enterprises, then I think we can look forward to a very speedy recovery from the crisis we are in. But when I say speedy, I am not looking at a few months. It's bound to be a year or year plus. Because if you look at even the large corporates, the Kamath Committee has made recommendations of debt restructuring. But I am very clear in my mind that another round of debt restructuring may well be required even for the large corporates once normalcy is back. And unfortunately, with the surge in cases today, the earlier optimism that we will now be back to near normal is again a question mark. We don't know when we'll be back to normal. There are lockdowns being thought of, implemented. So we are in very difficult times.
Absolutely. Difficult times. We'll have to see how things proceed and what best way we can go forward. Professor, let me bring you in once again. So, what are some of the other issues that need a little bit of, fixing, a little bit of tinkering, do you think?
So one thing is very clear. While the plan has been well designed and drafted and conceived, as already clarified by Mr. Goel, that's exactly my fear is. In case in this the leakages start taking place and you go back to square one, that your concept of 90 days, 120 days is over. You start afresh. That's exactly my fear is. Now, in addition to this, now look at the resolution professionals, RPs. Their role will have to be redefined. So far, what was happening, the RPs either had the management or control of the unit in their hands. And now that's not going to be there. So it's the promoter which continues to be there. So I think the challenges which I look at it, and I totally agree, we had to experiment given the surge of cases and the mortality rates that we are expecting. Something like this is really most welcome. But we will have to plan, we'll have to monitor it very carefully how it unfolds in the Indian circumstances. Now, in the European countries where it has been experimented and it has been successfully done, we all know there have also been challenges there. But the challenges in our country, and my most fearsome challenge always is that there is so much of lack of transparency that happens in the operations. Now, as our chartered accountant friend said, that look, there is a provision already made in case some games are being played, and one of the creditors, just one single resolution. Single resolution is not just one man saying, it's a resolution. Now that resolution, to bring that resolution into existence itself will be a challenge, to challenge the company's promoters. So therefore, I think we don't have to be shy of it. All I'm trying to say is, excellent plan, very large canvas, and we have to experiment it, but we have to experiment it with caution, and we have to monitor it very, very carefully. That's the same, and it's something new which we are experimenting with. That is why. By the way, I must add here, IBC has been the most successful plan in our country. So therefore, this is in the same direction. And the government also, I understand, has been very, very careful in saying if it succeeds in MSMEs, where amounts, of course, too many MSMEs are involved. And when you say 66% of the creditors, you have again a canvas there. But if it succeeds in MSMEs, the government plans to extend it elsewhere too, which I think is a very positive thing. So we are learning on the way, we are learning on the job, and I think that's the right way of going ahead, especially in these circumstances where we are.
Absolutely. All right, time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward. Starting first with you, Anil Goel.
So, Frank, this debt restructuring is not a new thing in this country. The debt restructuring, RBI also says again and again in various forms. Banks also come up with their debt restructuring plans very often. Different banks, different policies. With this PIRP, pre-packaged insolvency resolution process, I believe that the debt restructuring would become a kind of would concentrate into this PIRP process. The banks would like to go ahead in a transparent manner with a judicial stamp over it, with a consensual approval to the resolution plan, with a process of monitoring the uh, process, and the most of the professionals, the chartered accountants, they would gain, and the MSME also would gain to a large extent, because they would not live under stress. They would approach the appropriate financial creditors for their restructuring. Financial creditors will not hesitate. Financial creditors will immediately take a decision and will also get a stamp of judicial framework.
Mr. Shankar?
I do hope that this gives bank managers at the operational level sufficient confidence to take speedy decisions in the expectation that it will have an NCLT stamp on it, and so they need not be apprehensive. But then it requires the NCLT to be very decisive. And we have unfortunately not yet had a tradition of very quick decision making and just one day's hearing from quasi judicial bodies across the spectrum. So I do hope in the choice of personnel and the mandate that is given to them, it is made abundantly clear that the future of the Indian economy rests on their ability to decide very quickly and fairly. Because if we get the pile-up that may happen, if we go by extrapolation of any past trends, then the hope of very swift closure would appear very daunting. So I do hope that maybe special NCLT benches are created or staff is augmented or they bring in new processes of deciding. But speedy decision making from the NCLT and speedy decision making in the Committee of Creditors, these two are the key bottlenecks potentially and the key instruments whereby we can really get the economy out of the woods as soon as possible in as feasible a manner as possible.
And Professor Charan Singh, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I think it's an excellent initiative. It has to be experimented. We have to be cautious because there's so much at stake, and I think we have to now wait and see when the rubber hits the road how it comes out.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that the pre-pack insolvency scheme for the MSMEs is a step in the right direction. It's still too early to say how effective it will be. If we want it to work, we have to learn from the past and focus on a couple of fundamental things. One, of course, is transparency, and the second one is speedy recovery. If we can sort out these two aspects and empower the banks to make a speedy decision, then this will work. It's a good experiment, but we have to be cautious and monitor all aspects. If it works for the MSME sector, it should be implemented across the board. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team is running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me, and the program is called Hot Seat. The details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to come forward and contribute and keep the content alive. This weekend, we are going to start several new programs as well, so keep an eye out for them. I'm sure you'll love them all. All this is being done for you. This is your channel. Together, we will make Bharata great again, and we will be truly empowered. That's it from me. See you again next time.